Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Moytura from Bitewing Games. Moytura is designed by David Thompson and Trevor Benjamin, and it's a two-player thematic abstract game. This here is a prototype, all rules and components of the exchange, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. In Moytura, you're going to play the game out across 2 rounds. In round 1, one player is going to go first, and in round 2, other players going to go first, and in between there, you constantly have the opposing units that are basically enemies to everyone acting at the end of each player's turns, acting at the end of both players' turns. The way the game is going to play out is you're going to choose one of these gods to activate over here, one of these characters, these deities over here, to activate them and to take their benefits. So for example, maybe I want to go ahead and activate Morgan. Morgan's gonna be a simple one. I won't have to pay anything to activate them. I'm just gonna go ahead and do their ability, putting 2 troops into play. I'm doing 2 troops because it shows that over here, 1, 2 above the character, and I'm going to expand into a target adjacent to the origin. Right now I'm taking a turn as white, so I'm going to look at one of the 2 origins I have, keeping in mind these worship tokens are not specifically to the white player, they're just worship tokens. I do have some prototyping complaints, we'll come back to that later, but the white tokens aren't white, they're just white tokens for both players. But we do have the white player over here, the black player, and then we have the 3 tribes of the other AI factions. So we have Morgan over here. I'm going to expand into territory adjacent to the origin, and in this case I'm just going to go ahead and move out from here to try to get a foothold on the world. After expanding, defeat 1 or 2 enemy units. You know what, actually this is not the first one I'm going to do. I'm going to show you a different ability because I think this is not as good of a, maybe I will. I'm spending too much time trying to think through the optimal move instead of just taking a turn. I'm going to take a turn as Dagda. Now, Dagda does require an offering token to be placed back into the bank. To do so, I have 2 offering tokens, and so I'm going to take one and pay for it because you can see over here, activating one of the higher level gods does cost 1, 2, or 3 of these tokens. So I'm going to return that to the pool, and then I'm going to activate Dagda. The good news is Dagda lets me do 3 of these abilities over here, so I have a bit more coming out. And it says you may expand twice. The target of the first expansion may not be the origin of the second expansion. Basically, you can't ricochet out in directions over there. But what I could do is I can start getting a bit of a foothold over here. I'm going to place 1 down over here. Maybe I'll place 2 down over here, and I'll place 2 down over here, and I'm going to place 1 over here. Again, I'm too caught up in trying to play this strategically. When I'm done with that, we're going to move that character to the top over there, and then the opposing player will take a turn. So now we'll have Black go, and Black can now have different options of who they have access to. Black's going to try to go ahead, and do we do Morgan? Maybe we do Morgan. Black's over here. Again, the problem is Morgan expands into a target adjacent to the origin. After expanding, I could defeat 1 or 2 enemy units. The problem is I kind of want to defeat more. 1 or 2 in the target or spaces adjacent. So here's what we'll do. We'll activate Morgan. I'm going to activate Morgan. I'm going to expand outwards to this spot over here with those 2 units for my supply. And then I'm going to, after expanding, defeat 1 or 2 enemy units in the target or spaces adjacent to the target. And so these spaces are adjacent to the target, so I'm going to go ahead and kill those 2 enemy units. Well, actually, I keep those because you can use those to trade in 3 enemy tokens for worship tokens over here. And so that's going to be my action, and we're going to move this to the top. That's a basic action that you take in the game. Now, I didn't get any extra worship cubes, which would have been great because I want to show you a few things, but before we get there, we're going to draw a card from the top of this deck, and this is going to be the Fomorians are going to activate, expand normally, placing 2 units. The Fomorians are going to be the green tribe over here. They're going to expand, placing 2 units along any pathway they can reach over here along their roads from their single largest offering. So we're going to go ahead and place 2 over there, we'll place 2 over here, and then we'll place 2 over here. They are expanding along these roads. They're also going to expand over here to where I am fighting them, which means those 2 are going to pop in here, and then we're going to take each other out at a rate of 1 for 1, so I will get 2 kills on them, which is nice, but then I'm going to lose these 2 units, and it looks like that's their full expansion over here. They get pretty violent very quickly if you don't contain the enemies. Back to White's turn over here. We should try to get our hand on some of these cubes over here. Maybe we'll just take Tuatha over here, expand into a target adjacent to the origin, take 1 worship token for the supply. So we're only going to get 1 troop out. We're going to put it over here. Because we placed it over here, we're going to take this token, and then because we took the bottom god, this one always stays at the bottom, we're instead going to take an offering token from the supply, so we're going to take 1 of those instead of paying 1. So the very bottom spot gives you 1, but only gives you 1 unit. And so I got 1 placement out, I took a spot from the board, and I took 1 over there, and that will give me some more actions, which you'll see why that's important shortly. It goes back to Black turns over here. Black's going to go ahead and take an action with Dagda. They're going to spend 2 offering tokens, and because we went to the second from the top, we'll take 1 of their spots over here, placing it over here, which means they're going to get extra placements. They'll get the 3 from over here, but they'll get an additional 1, and any future turn, regardless of where Dagda is, if they activate Dagda, they get an additional 1 because of that. And so we're going to go ahead and do the Day of Creation. We get 4 because that additional 1, we played those offering cubes. Dagda is going to go to the top at the end of this action, but you can expand twice. The target of the first expansion may not be the origin of the second expansion. So we're going to do that first action we did, trying to expand outwards, possibly getting into some combats over here. Maybe we'll place 3 units into this spot over here, trying to expand into here, which will kill these 2 and then take out some of the my units as well. And because I have enough of these, I'll trade these into the supply to take a token, gaining me that. And then we can go ahead, we could expand that this way over here, but I'm going to go ahead and try to get my hands on another worship token so I can start building my expansion. That's going to be the basic way the game plays out. You're taking turns, each player taking a turn, then having the card draw and them taking their turn. Your goal is to try to get as much control of these areas because at the end of 5 turns, you're going to score whoever has first and second place points, and you're going to do so for both sides, meaning you're going to do so for yourself, for your enemy, and then the 3 enemy tribes are going to score as one single unit. On this track over here, they're going to score as well for whoever has first and second place majority in all of these individual zones around the board. So you have 5 tokens to spread your influence. If you do, by the way, spend the action to go up here, if I spend all 3 of these to go there, then you get a spot in the top spot, meaning I'd get 5 placements, and then again, in future turns, even if Morgan's down here, I will get the additional 2, so I'll get 3 plus 2 whenever that happens. That's going to be these symbols here. When you go to these spots, you get a permanent spot on those, building up your tableau so you can spread further and get more units on the board every time you take actions. You're going to have 5 turns, you're going to score. Then you're going to have 5 turns, this time Black's going to go first, and then you're going to score again with the enemy activating after each of your turns, not each of your turns, each pairing of your turns. You're going to go to the end game, see who has the most points, and that is basically how you play Moytura. There is a bunch of expansion content as well, various ways to add various monsters, to add another god to the board, a bunch of things that will mix up the general gameplay, but that's the general gameplay loop of what you're doing over here. You are playing an abstract area control game where you activate various gods, utilize their ability as to how they spread and what they do, trying to lock in your placement on those gods to be able to do more on subsequent turns, and then trying to outplace your opponent as far as the tactical maneuvering and the setup to both make sure you're outscoring them as well as the various tribes you're competing with. That brings us to my review of what I like, don't like, conceal as not liking, and let's start off with what I like, which is I generally like this system over here. I'm not sure how I feel about it as a competitive game, but I really like the system. It almost makes me want to build a fully cooperative or solo puzzle out of it. The expansion of the enemy AI, it works really well. It can feel overwhelming at first, but if you set yourself up with your tableau and you get the right placements and you manage to cut them off, because of the way that the enemy spreads based off all these roads in the single connected group, you have the opportunity to try to cut them off and make smaller groups with less expansion. So there's a lot of tactical placement as far as how to shut down the enemy, and that's a very satisfying puzzle. You're also trying to be mindful of where the points are and how to spread, but you're balancing several things. You're balancing where to get these tokens over here, where the most points can be, where to lock in for that tableau benefit, when to go for the Tuatha over here to be able to get a few more tokens to be able to have a few smaller first turns, but then subsequent larger turns where you're placing up more units every single turn. What that trade-off is of getting enemy units to get more of those tokens, so again, to spread out your tableau, you're trying to get as much done. How much do you want to spread between different gods for the flexibility versus focusing your tableau on getting a few gods that you can just activate those 2 gods every single time, consistently benefiting from the extra units you're going to get. And so there's a lot to juggle as far as this simple system. Activate a god, move it to the top, build up your tableau, and spread your forces. There's a lot of cutting off you're going to do. This is not a battle in the typical sense. You can't spread your entire horde into battle. It's all about those new placements, which means very often situationally setting yourself up in ways that block your opponents or block your human opponent. That'll give you a lot of control over the board, and so there's a lot of thinking through how to control for this map. And there is variable setup over here. We have a setup card that gives you how you're going to control the map, but in the final game, this is a prototype, there's only 1 card over here that works, but in the final game there's going to be more setup cards that can be more ways, including with some of the expansions, that give you more ways to set up the board for variable placement and variable game situations you have to dive into, as well as the sheer number of cards and again, enemy forces and expansion forces that can really mix up the base gameplay. So overall, it's a satisfying, tactical, abstract puzzle with a lot of cutthroatness to it, but there are also things I don't like. And the biggest thing I don't like at the end of the day, and it's tricky because this game does a lot of things well for me. The thing it doesn't do as well is I feel this is too swingy for it to be a pure abstract game. There's too much luck, there's too much things outside your control. The way the enemy advances can be punishing to one side more than the other. It doesn't feel like a true abstract in that sense, but it does feel like an abstract in the sense of the tools at your disposal. Meaning this feels like you're playing chess with an AI opponent who's choosing who to punish at any given time. And yes, how you engage with the board does matter. I mean, it's never gonna be pure luck, but at the end of the day, which tribe activates at any given point and to what extent they activate, and therefore who they punish, is certainly certainly going to be a thing that is variable. It is more than just variable, it's random. It's random as far as how the game operates. And so you have this thing which it feels like it's a strong abstract game, but it feels like it's an area control game, but it closes in 5 rounds and then 5 rounds, which means you don't actually get to do as much as you're properly trying to do. It really feels like it does a lot of things well for an abstract, a lot of things well for an area control game, but it ends up being neither properly and fully in a way that leaves me wanting a bit more out of it. It felt satisfying to engage with the puzzle, but it didn't have the cleanliness of a pure abstract, nor did it have the full-on demolishing of an actual area control where I don't mind a little more chaos thrown into it. It straddled the lines of those two genres, and it did so in a way that felt like I would rather have seen it move more to one side or the other than the straddling that it does. It's a very specific complaint, but that's ultimately the main issue I have with Moytura. It does a lot of things really well, but it straddles that line in a way that I found less satisfying than I would want. As far as I can see, others not liking this game. Honestly, I don't know if there's more to it. This is a pure abstract game. I think that luck aspect, because the luck aspect is a tricky thing. It's not the luck that bothers me on its own. It's the luck that bothers me while feeling otherwise that it's a pure abstract strategy game. It's all about I place this and I move that, and then the luck throws in. That's where it bothers me. If this were more full of an area control, I don't think I'd mind it as much. It's because it toes that line. But the fact that players are punished differently depending on how things go, that can certainly be a factor that holds it back for you. The way the area control is more staggered. Again, the fact that you can't really move. If you have a giant pile of units, you can't just move them across the board. They're really just sitting there taking up space, holding more of a defensive pattern in the game. So it really does kind of have these abstract rules layered onto a area control game that can feel both non-thematic, and that can be a factor. I will say I touched upon this a little bit, but there are a lot of prototype issues, or what at least I hope are prototype issues. I don't think these cubes should be white when you have a full white player. It's confusing. The lines on the board over here, we have lines separating the regions and lines for the road, and they're both white, and I find that visually not the easiest to follow. There's a lot of small things like that can hold back the game just from a prototype standpoint, but I am hopeful those are just prototype issues. So I'm not overly leaning into them. I'm still calling them out a little bit because whenever prototype issues end up being final game issues, this is the time to call them out. As far as final thoughts on Moytura, I still enjoyed Moytura. I had fun playing through this, and it's one of those, I've had fun diving into a few other expansions. I haven't dived into all of them. Overall, this is a satisfying game, but I'm torn because I really like the system. The overall system here, it feels clunky when you first teach it. When you first learn it and teach it, it feels a little clunky as far as the way you operate differently than the AI. But it really has a system where the AI feel like they're spreading out, but it also feels controllable. It feels like if you take the right actions in the right way, you have a controllable engine, a controllable puzzle on your hand. But then it mixes it up because you're really playing against another player, which kind of, again, that whole combination of area control and abstract, there's both things I really appreciate about Moytura and things that held it back for me. Overall, I'm going to be coming in at a 3.5 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, definitely check out Mythic Mischief. For some reason, this one made me feel Mythic Mischief. The gameplay is totally different in these, but it felt, I guess, if I'm thinking of a thematic abstract, this feels like one of the more thematic abstracts I've played recently, and it reminds me of Mythic Mischief in the sense that is also a very thematic abstract, but that one is a lot more abstract, a lot less chaos from the randomness that will show up in the game. And then if you're just looking for something that's going to be a fun area control game that gives off the vibes of this game, definitely check out Inish, one of my favorite area control games. It pulls away entirely from the abstract puzzle, dives heavily into area control, but with a lot of cleverness to the game experience. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.